yes, our ancestor who also grows some cereals.
Winter barley is being cut now. That's basically done and dusted. So that isn't, the weather is just going to help that harvest. So that's good news. On the spring barley and the winter wheat, particularly winter wheat, which is the main crop. There is stress in those crops right now. It will vary across the country. In the Cotswolds where I farm, it's been a particularly dry year, so we're seeing those wheat crops really under stress at the moment, and that will affect yield and possibly quality.
Well, with us now to explain a wee bit more about how the heat will affect food prices is Janatha Stout from Northleach. She's a sheep farmer, but also an expert in rural affairs, farming and agriculture. Morning. Welcome to Monday Morning.
Morning. Thank you, Mark.
Great to get you on. So can you just give us shall we start with the bad news and the reality? How soon do you think this is going to affect yield and food prices?
Well, what's happening at the moment is that the heat wave is causing heat stress in both plants and animals. So, for example, strawberry farmers thought were going to have a bumper crop this year. They had lots of flowers on their plants in the spring. There were no late frosts. Lots of berries were growing. And then what's happened, we've had very little rain for months now. So lots of that fruit just shriveled up, basically, didn't grow on the vine. Also, you've heard someone else mention about apples and pears and things. It could happen. Prices could possibly rise within the next month. It's not inevitable, but it is possible. I mean, there are cases I've heard of farmers who are selling off beef animals now because they haven't got a decent amount of grass to feed them on. That means if there's a glut of livestock onto the market, prices will drop. But that, of course, has implications for later on in the year. So if prices drop now, there'll be less animals and prices will rise later on in the year.
Gosh, it's quite a complex science, isn't it? Yeah, so the grass isn't growing. That does have that big influence on livestock.
Yeah, of course it does. Yeah, and also dairy cows. Dairy cows are producing on average at the moment about 5 litres a cow less per day because the goodness isn't there in the grass. So those dairy farmers are feeding winter forage. They're feeding the hay now. So that means they won't have as much for later on in the year.
Right, and also, some farmers are keeping their cows indoors. And so are some farmers having to use the winter feed now and early?
Well, exactly. So I know the case of a dairy farmer who's keeping his cows in during the day to keep them out of the intense heat, if you like, early on in the day, feeding the hay then, and then they're going out at night to graze, but they're using that hay, they're using that silage during the day.
Right. The rain predicted this week, we know it's just a drop in the ocean. We are going to get stuff and there could be some heavy stuff. This whole thing about our parched earth and it just runs off. Does the flooding affect the farming community as well as we think our roads and our sort of domestic lives here?
Well, yes, it does, because if you have a large amount of rain in a very short time and the ground is dry, it doesn't soak in, it runs off, and what it does is it causes soil erosion and it washes those nutrients that are in the surface of the soil out. They all go down into the streams, and then that causes problems with water, but it's also you're losing all that goodness, if you like, out of the soil.
Next job for you this morning, what have you got on then? What's the first thing you're going to do after you finish this interview?
I've got some sheep's feet to trim.
Have you? Okay. Well, I better not delay you at all with a bit of trimming to do. Janatha, thank you very much indeed. Sheep farmer, expert in rural affairs, farming and agriculture. Nice to hear the voices of Northleach with us this morning. 13 minutes past 8. Right.